Good evening, everyone. I have gone live a little early so I can then sort out the rest of my social media feeds because that's what's clearly required. I just need to find a link. There we are. And then, oops, I didn't want to do that. There we are. It just takes me a bit to get this all shared. Well, it sorts itself out. That's not going to let me share it today. Well, that's okay. Welcome to whoever is joining us. Hey, hello, Juliana. Thank you so much for letting me know that you've arrived. I have to say I'm finding it not as friendly to do the lives on and up, but I do get that actually it's more sustainable long term. Okay, that is dry. That's always a helpful activity. So we're going to do something different tonight. I gave a very cryptic title. I know I gave a cryptic title, and that was partly intentional because it gave my options open. So let's just move all of these bits out of the way. I'm using Furry Friends tonight. I would say it's not my favourite collection. No, I know many of you will love it. I don't sort of do animals generally, but there we are. Anyway, dogs are some people's very definitely best friends, and cats are others. And you could do this project depending on your chosen pet in either of those two, because there are cat molds as well as dog molds. So your choice, your way, which makes the collection actually incredibly versatile. So I just have a nice wooden board, and let's just give it. So I'm using a mixture of products today. I've chosen to work with the Pentart wall decor products as well as the regular Pentart products, and I haven't brought in my water, so that's me being very naughty. Let me just sort that out. It's all I thought I'd opened everything, so there we are. Let's just do that, and then let's just clear that. Wow, we might not be using that wall decor chalky painted. There we are. We can lift that up, get rid of that. There we are. So this is the wall decor primer paint. I'm afraid that we are going to have several lots of drying and painting today. So let's just give this wooden plaque. I didn't have a house-shaped one. You could use a house-shaped one if you wanted, but this will work with any shape. I've just picked up the textured one I had, the shaped one I had, which comes from the Pentart wooden board collection that they have on their website. But as I say, you could do this on an MDF base or any shape that you wanted. And we're just going to prime this, give my base a nice even colour, and then we're going to be building our layers and our texture from here outwards. And there will be, I'm afraid, lots of drying along the way, because that's what happens when you do mixed media pieces. There we are. So I still think that lots of people have not transitioned over from Facebook, but we will see how it goes. It always takes a little bit of time. Change can be quite difficult for people. There we are. So let's just give this a nice layer. So this is a wooden base. The primer paint in the wall decor range is much thinner than the primer paste, the clue being in the title, so it goes on as a nice even layer. You can let it dry and then give the surface a sand, but as I'm going for texture, it doesn't matter. Whenever you add a wet product to a wooden board, it absorbs unevenly into the texture of the wood, and so often if you run your fingers over it, you'll feel little bumps or a grittiness. For a project that you want a really smooth surface, then you need to sand. But for this one, it won't matter, because that's not what we're going for. Oh yeah, my bad for not bringing in my washing water, but hey ho. Yeah, so let's just give this a little clear, but little dry. It won't take very long whilst we get, and then we can start building our steps bit by bit by bit. Well, I've got my lights on. I apologise that my face is looking a bit dark and dusty. Let me let's just move that a little bit. There we are. That's just me having re-angled my computer so that you can see less of my ring light, because unfortunately in the winter, apart from my conservatory being really cold, it's also really dark. So we just need to get this dry. And there is no way short surface in this, apart from doing all the oil cups on it. And that really does then defeat the purpose of doing the live stream in the first place. Yeah, so we just got this dry. It's not something you can rush. If you force dry things, which is what I'm doing, the real risk is that you'll dry the surface off, and then as you take the heat away, the wet from underneath will come back up to the surface. So, and you'll see areas that were matte become shiny in real life. I don't think that shows very well on screen, but that's the reality of life. So, look at this dry. I don't want to bubble what I've got either, but there we are. And this is all good. Yes, it was important to come back first area and then come back over it and really make sure it's properly dry before you do the next steps. Otherwise your layers muddy together. And that might work for you, but equally it might not be quite what you want to happen. See, I've got mucky fingers before we even start. It's just what happens, isn't it? Right, we're going to call that dry. In an ideal world, I might leave it just a little bit longer. So on my floor, conveniently close to me, I have the next products that I'm going to use. And that is the cracking plaster from the Wall Decor range. It gives a very different crack to the Pentart range cracking plaster. But for the project, you could swap them out if that's, and it wouldn't affect the overall look. But the style of the crack will be different. So this has a 2-part component. So we're going to be painting white on white. I know, what a pain. But hey ho, that is just life. Whilst we do that, let's just do that. So this is a primer. So we're just going to give this, and let's hope that I don't miss critical areas, a layer of the cracking paste primer. This is an important step because it allows the next product to crack, but also keeps the surface stable long term. So one of the problems with single component cracks, or not using primer, cracking primer, is that if you're not careful, then things are not stable long term. And this is another heat stable product, although I have to confess and say that I like the cracks better when it is left to dry naturally. But we're going to have a needs must. So it's another white product. It goes on shiny. It'll be clear, but as the base is white, it's going to be white because when on camera, but will dry clear and will mattify a little bit. Yeah, let's just do that. Otherwise, we're going to have. So it's a water-based product, which then means that we have easy cleanup because we can just pop our brushes into water to give them a good dry. So let's just lid that and dry again. I'm going to need to do these in stages because we've got multiple steps to do. None of these take a really long time, however, to dry, which is cool. I just need to get them. So I trust that everyone is well and enjoying life. They're recovered from the excesses of Christmas. If they've made New Year resolutions, but you've still got them in place, we're all guilty of making them and then not following them through, aren't we? Yeah, I know. I'm definitely not the only person who will make a New Year's resolution and then promptly break it within 2 or 3 days. But we're going strong this year. And I hope that some of you will be looking forward to nice things for Valentine's Day, which is about 2 and a bit weeks away, isn't it? Because it's nearly the end of January. Then the next big celebration, I think it will be Chinese New Year, which is right at the end of February, and this year is the year of the horse. And I have got my thinking cap on for then. As we know, I do a live every Thursday for Concert, so my mates will sometimes be very seasonal, but sometimes will feature products that have a universality to be made at any time of the year. We're getting on with this. I've just got some areas in the middle that are still shiny. So let me just get this properly dried over before I can do the next bit. My live stream for next Thursday is planned. Has one of my usual cryptic titles, and but will feature family, love, and nice, and then we can go from there. I think the important areas where I'm going to have crackles showing long term are probably now just about dry. Now I have the advantage of knowing where I'm going with this, which of course always makes life a little bit easier. Yeah, that will work. So let's just grab a palette knife. I've got lots of them, so that won't matter. So the second component is the cracking plaster. Now this comes in 150ml tubs, 500 and litres. So choose the size that works for you. I clearly have a very large pot, but that's because I have it for demoing. If you are a crafter, not a wall decorator, then I strongly advise that you only get the 150ml pot because it will last for ages. So this is the cracking plaster. Let me just get rid of that hard lump. I'm going to pop it on with my palette knife and just give myself a coat. It doesn't have to be even. I'm not very good at smoothing things out, so there we are. But I do want a covering. I want some cracks underneath. I want some cracks over the top. Your crackle depth will be determined by the thickness of your piece. So just give this, and if you've got solid lumps, take them out of the way. There we are. More solid lump on that one. We'll just spread this over. I do have the advantage of knowing where the critical areas are, so as I say, but a little bit of unevenness and texture won't matter. I'm sort of wanting a wall look of a partially destroyed wall. So there we are. Let's just pop that into there, and then we can pop this aside. So in front of my fan heater, that I apologise will be noisy on my floor, so I can then carry on with the next bits whilst these things are drying a little bit. Come on, there we are. Fill that gap. Mixed media pieces are always about the multiple layers, and that's definitely my signature for those of you that haven't seen my style of work before. I'm hoping that we get pretty grungy, or rather than necessarily antique aged. Aging absolutely has a purpose, and I use that technique a lot. But I definitely think my pieces focus more on pretty and themes rather than just on being brocante or or ancient. They've got a more modern feel to them, I think is the word I'm trying to say. Right, so let's pop that on there. Let me give that lid a proper dry. There is some texture on this. I don't think it's coming over on screen particularly well, particularly not on a small screen, but there is a little bit, and that will all add to the feel. If you wanted it to be completely flat, then just spend as much time as you need, maybe with a flat palette rather than or a flat trowel rather than my palette knife, just to smooth it out that little bit more, so that it's less textured. There we go. You can see up here, I definitely, if I lift this up to the camera, that I have got an unevenness, and that's not going to worry me for my piece. If I was doing it on a proper wall, that might be a different matter, but for now that is not going to worry me. So let's just pop that there. That can go on there in front of the heater. Hopefully that'll dry. And then I'll clear the mess that I've got now on my arms. Because why not? Why not? And so, as I don't require to get that everywhere, particularly on a new top, because I was daft enough to come on there this evening in a new top, we'll just clear that all down. So I have, as I say, pieces that have come from the moulds that go with Furry Friends by Stamperia. Now, some of these have come from the mould that primarily focuses on dogs, and these little bits have come from, I think, the mould that primarily focuses on the cats. And you could, apart from the bone, you could do this, which would need to substitute for another element. This is a project that you could make either dog or cat focus, depending on which is your favourite animal. Okay, so these have been cast with the white rapid resin, and then off camera I have painted them with the primer paste gesso. I just feel it gives them a better key for the paint. And I'm going to do a little bit of painting. There we are. Let's find a nice brush. So I'm mixing up my paints again this evening. This is a decor paint, chalky in cream white. So let me just give this a good paint. Someone's come in behind me. Can move something. That'll be my husband with my brush pot, I think, because I can hear the brushes moving. I can say that was my bad. So this is a little bone, and it says the word smile on it, which I think is an appropriate word, because I think our pets do make us smile. There we are. I'm going to pop that on there. Now, let us do. So it's entirely up to you, but I have a dog from the collection, and so I am going to base my colouring sort of with the colours that are in the papers. Someone has gone to the trouble to colour everything on the paper, so it seems logical to me to then be able to use those colours as a guide for painting your resin pieces. Obviously, you could custom colour these to your own animal, and that would work just absolutely fine. So I'm just picking out the detail that's there. The eye is a bit more of a problem, so I'm going to leave that like that for the moment. So let us just give this animal the same sort of treatment. Get rid of the bits of hair that I've managed to get dried into there, which wasn't very clever. And then we can add in some more colours. So there's a helpful tip, I think, if you're working with a collection of papers, you're not too sure what to do in terms of your colours, then just to have a little look at the papers and then colour match your pieces to the, to your paints, to the ones that you have that work with the papers, or completely go freestyle and paint them the colours that work for your idea for your pets, if that makes any sense to anyone whatsoever. So I could have picked tans and browns, but I've actually gone for falcon brown and chestnut. So I've got a red based and a blue based brown here. So let's just give these a little bit of a coat with these, and I will pick out the eyes later on and add in some black. So yeah, there we are. I just thought it might be helpful to say how I choose my colours when I'm working with a project like that. And I've got a very tiny area there, so let me just pick up a little round brush, and then hopefully we'll not contaminate an area that we don't want contaminated. There we go. Make sure that that is all painted in. As I say, you can then come back later on and pick out the colours that you want to suit yourself. There's lots of details on the moulds just waiting for you to colour and then customise. There we are. So we'll paint that eye in later on. when that top layer is dry. And again, if you're working on your own, my suggestion is that you paint one colour, let that dry fully, and then come back once it's dry and do the next one. You'll have less spreading of colour then, and it will make your life a little bit easier. But it's not essential to do that. And I'm going to have a little bit of a pickle there. I can see that, but I can come back in and I can tidy up what I want. Let's just swap to that smaller brush. To get into those nooks and crannies. I have a feeling that the base of these aren't going to be on show, but we'll paint it in anyway. We'll turn that round and then we can paint this bit of this. There we are. So you can see that although these moulds might look delicate or complicated or intricate, actually they don't take ridiculous amounts of time for painting in. And I think this colour is the chestnut is working quite nicely. So I might keep it without adding the, and I think more in the falcon brown. I think it might be a little bit dark. We'll see. There we are. And we'll bring out the details anyway, so that's okay. Right, let's go to that little brush, because it's helpful to choose a brush that's appropriate for the size of the piece that you're working with. And I'm going to have to, I will tidy up some of that white, that cream, because where I've overlapped, by the time I've distressed it, it probably won't matter too much. There we are. That's definitely going to get hidden, so don't worry about the fact that I've gone underneath there. There we are. Let's turn that round. And I've definitely got white paint on there, so let me just get rid of most of that. And all the details are there on the piece, so it doesn't really matter from that point of view. Yeah, well, there we are. So let's just keep that brush in some water, aka a baby wipe, and clean up that, and we'll give those. There we are, and we're going to move off to another colour. So I have underneath here some different shades. So I've chosen to work with this as a rice paper, and it's got shades of blue. So I've picked up mint, turquoise, and turquoise blue. Now these are all colours that you can buy in 20ml pots as part of the Rust Paint Effect collection, or in 50 or even bigger pots. And I also have a colour called white coffee, which we may or may not use. So there we are. So we're going to have a little bit of a mix. So let's just take that off there, get rid of that. Pop that there. So these are number icons. So we're just going to cover these. I am going to do my usual messy painting technique with these. I'm going to mix it up so that I don't contaminate my paints. I'm just going to pop some of that turquoisey, ordinary green onto there. That's the ordinary turquoise even. There we are, the ordinary turquoise in the acrylic paint mat. I'll pop some of the turquoise blue. I love this colour. I think it's beautiful. onto there. Hopefully I can squirt out some of the mint, which will be good. There we are, onto there. And then we're just going to have these. These are just going to form as icons on the finished piece. So there we are. I don't want these as a single colour, so I am going to need to be careful. I want them to blend where the colours meet, but I definitely want areas that are defined and definitely different to each other. I don't want it all to be that turquoise, nor do I want it all to be the mint. And there is a risk when you're wet blending like this that the colours will all merge and become just one colour. And if that's happening, then just change your brush and clean that down and start again, so you keep the colours separate, separate to each other. There we are. Lots of these to do, but none of them hugely big, so that's always good, isn't it? Little bit, so approximately third of each tile is going to be one colour or the other. Gets a bit harder when you've got tiny squares. These could be little wooden ones, but we're going to keep to the same colour palette just because I think it's a good colour palette for me for working with. There we are. And they are definitely becoming a bit mergy there, but that's okay. I'll live with that. There we are. These could be almost like pieces of metal is the word I'm looking for, metal panels. But again, it won't really matter. You could really go full rust effect if you wanted to, but there we are. So those are those, those are those, those are those. Right, let's just swap to a nice small brush again, and then clean hands, because that's always helpful. And we have some black, and we have, look at the mess, and we have these little collars on the dogs. So I have country green, so I'm keeping with this soft colour palette. I don't want to be here forever. That one will do. And I don't want to mess this up. So let's just take this country green, pale soft green, and paint in the collar for my dog with that soft green, and holding on the bit that I know is going to be black at the moment, so that's okay. The fact that I've covered over it doesn't really matter. We'll do the same here. The brown paint is still not completely dry, and I'm going to mix into this one some of that darker turquoise, so I have a softer colour or a more graded colour at this point for here. And we're going to see how well and steady my hand is going to be long term. Here we are. Just gives us a slightly different look. That can go into there, that can go there. Let's pop that into there. The bones can stay that colour, and some acrylic paint matte in black, because why not? That brush is not in very good condition. It's not flexible. which will be my bad. Of course it'll be my bad. Yeah, here we are. So let's just pick up some black with a nice fine brush and then make a mess. I'm standing up to do this, which is maybe not the best option in the world. I might have been better off sitting down. There we are. So let's just add some black into that eye. There we are. Spend your time to be as accurate as you feel that you wish to be. There isn't anything that says it has to be entirely accurate, particularly not if you're antiquing and distressing things, which we will be, because it wouldn't be me if there wasn't a bit of distressing lurking in the system. There we are. We don't have any whiskers on there, which is good, so I don't need to stress about that. This one I might be a little bit more of a problem because there are some whiskers on here, and that will need a dry brush later on. There we are. So if you lift your resin piece up, stabilise your hands, which I've not got here, and then just, as I say, just be careful. So let's just take a nice thin brush. I can pop that into there. I'm going to come back with some ivory in a minute when that is dry, and I will tidy that up. So I'm just going to do that, and then I can thin it down, because I appreciate that looks like a veritable mess at the moment, and that's fine, because actually, to be honest, that's what we do have. But layering will solve the problem for you. There we are. Okay, let's just do the buckle on the collar. And then we'll give this a little bit of a blast dry and be able to tidy up a little bit. There we are. And we'll definitely, some eyes would be helpful. There we are. I can add the white of the eye when that is all properly dry. So let me just give that a wee blast. That's the cream crackered one. Let's just pop that over there. Pop that over there. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. Pop that in there to dry, and then let's just mop up this. And as I say, we're going to give these a bit of a blast, and we can then tidy up. You can't tidy up while things are wet, because all that will happen is the areas that I want to be green will suddenly all become a dirty, mucky mess. Let's just get the eyes where I do want to add some dots of white, but can't until it's dry, and that mouth properly dry. We'll get all of these pieces dry. And I'm going to tidy up. So, I hope that so far it's an enjoyable watch and that you're intrigued as to see how we're going to put it all together with our background and what elements I'm going to use on my background. My cracking plaster is cracking, but might well also need a bit of a force dry. I'll stop doing that. So another bit is nearer the pan. There we are. Let's just pop those over there. And then as I say, I just need a little bit of a tidy up for that, for some of these areas. So hopefully, there we are. I'm just going to come in here and add a little bit of white. Just give that a tidy. Well, it's the cream white. Just give that a little bit of a tidy up. I definitely don't want such a wide nose, and because I've now got that dry, I can actually paint over that. If I hadn't waited for it to dry, then actually you would end up with an awful mess, because that's what happens if you try and paint over partially dried paint. There we are. So I've got a little bit, that's better sized mouth now. Now my standard trick for eye dots is to use a little ballpoint, which are tucked in front behind me. Of course, the one I want to use, can I see? Of course, I can't see it. Well, why would I see why would my smallest one that I use all of the time not be there? So we're going to revert to the next trick that you'll see me use on a fairly regular basis. Let's move that off there, which is actually a needle. And I can then add a little dot into there to bring in. So it's literally just a thick needle, a tapestry needle, that will allow me to do that. There we are. Because I find that just easier for doing those, and they live on magnets on my camera stand. But just adding that little extra dot just makes a big difference to the piece. So let's just give those a dry, and then we can move on with the base. Once these have had a layer of varnish, they're all too clean for me at the moment. Get those on edge down. So try and pop your dots symmetrically, otherwise it looks like your poor animals are squinting or got a strange look in their face. Remember, it's it's paint. Let it dry, repaint over if that's what you need to do. No right, no wrong in any of these. Right, so I have some varnish. I've got a matte varnish here. It's my go-to decor soft matte for doing these with, and a softish brush that will work. So there we are. So let's just start with these pieces. It's not going to stay without the words highlighted. You can highlight by, or you can emphasize something by either filling in the depths, low lighting, or by using dry brushing or wax over the surface, or you can do a combination of the two. On small pieces, if you tried a combination of low lighting for the depths and highlights for the very surfaces, you do run the risk of it all becoming one, just because it's harder to keep things into one place when you're doing that. I don't need that great big thick glob of varnish there, so I'm just going to lift it off so that I don't have thick areas that will distort my texture primarily, but also take an age to dry. So yeah, just be careful with the amount of a varnish you're using. If you like a shiny finish, feel free to use a shiny varnish. There's a soft touch, and if you like the idea that we've got animals, there is a varnish called Soft Touch, which is beautiful, which really does give your projects a beautiful soft feel. So choose your varnish according to your needs and your preferences. There we are. And then I'm going to pop these all off to the side in a minute and grab my base and show you just how well the cracking plaster has worked. And as I say, it's a different crack entirely to the cracking paste that comes in the classic Pentart family of products. So the varnish will go on milky, but will ultimately dry clear. Let's pop that into that, put that into that, stick that there. And then I can tuck some of this stuff out of my way. Let me just move that down there a little bit. I can get rid of some of this, so there's less busyness on there. And then I can pop these up out of the way while they can dry naturally, and we'll heat dry them at the end if we need to. But for the moment, we can just give this a little bit of a clean down. I work on a glass mat because it makes it easy clean up, and I also use a knife when I'm cutting things. So that works best on a glass mat. But it also makes for easy clean up. I can just scrape up the loose bits and pop that into the bin. So let me pick up my panel. So this has the cracking plaster on it. And if I lift it up, you can see that it's cracked beautifully. Now, some of those areas are still a little damp, and I've got variation in size from small down here where it was thin to thicker areas, and it just gives a beautiful, beautiful effect. So, where's my next step? So I'm obviously not going to leave it as a plain background, because why would I do that? Because it's me, I guess. So I am going to add over some of this, and I'm going to cover some of these cracks in the process, a rice paper, and that's fine because that's my choice. But you could just as easily then colour this any colour that you want, and we're going to colour the part of this. So don't be so thinking that I'm not. That's got word. This piece of paper comes from a Furry Friends collection, and it's got words. So for my brain, the words have to be up properly. There we are, because otherwise it would irritate me. So let's just pop that onto there. Make sure I have enough glue. I've just torn a single piece of rice paper. I will tidy up the edges when I need to, off the live when it's properly dry, or later on in the live when it's properly dry. Let's just do that because I've got a shaped board. Yeah, that's because I've chosen to work with a shaped board, and I'm going to push this down, and it will sit in to the crackles and cover them up. But that's fine. Yeah, that's where we're going for this, and it's going to give me some texture underneath. I won't be able to see all of the crackles, but that's not what I want to do. I just wanted a base for working from, and we're going to have an area in the middle that will. So this is the Pentart decoupage glue and varnish. I've got a well-loaded brush, and I am making sure I've got glue below, and then the glue, I'm using the glue as a varnish over the top to keep everything safe. And now we're going to repeat the same at the bottom of here. Because I can. You'll see why I've got so much stuff out in a minute. There we are. Give this a nice layer. So I could pre-fill the cracks in the back of where I'm putting the rice paper, but I don't want to because the rice paper is busy enough, I think, feel as it is. But I will get, if I push this in properly, some texture. So I'm just going to pop that onto there, make sure it's vaguely upright. I'm going to move that over a little bit more. There we are. And don't be afraid to tear your pieces. Now I know, did I have rice glue up there? Probably not. So let's just pop this up here. And remember, I've got a shaped board, so I can ultimately, I will return the shape once this is all dried in place by just sanding off the edges. So let's see where we get to. It will need to be properly dry before I can sand off the edges. And of course I want to have a good layer of varnish over the top because we are going to be adding some colours, and we are going to be blending some of these edges. So it's not quite such a harsh line. I want the surfaces to work together. I have a lovely good friend, the gentleman Vasilis Kontos, who says, if in doubt, varnish twice. Because whenever you're adding distressing products over, they will sit into surfaces that are not varnished. And if you varnished it properly, with and got the whole thing, then you will be able to lift the distressing products off before they have dried. So that can go there, that can go there, that can go there. Return to floor. Let's just give this a bit of a dry. And I can dry off our resin pieces at the same time. Where is my bone? Where is my bone? So there we are. You need very definitely the edges, and I can feel that I haven't got that glued down, which is my bad. So whilst that is drying down there, I can just add some more glue there and push that down. Hopefully that will get that. Put that over there in case I need to get it again, but hopefully not. So I'll just give this a wee bit of a dry. I can leave some of the edges again to dry in front of the fan heater in a minute. But I do want to add some more things to this. I can't do that while this is wet. I don't know if anyone has any questions. If you're signed in and subscribed to Pentart's page, you'll be able to comment for me. If you're not, then I would highly recommend that you do look at Pentart's page. If you don't want to subscribe to YouTube, or then that's absolutely fine. But otherwise, if you want to know how to use any of the Pentart mediums, if you put into the search engine how to use Pentart and then the name of the product, it will give you links to the demonstrations on how to use the products, and there are demonstrations for every single Pentart product that they have in their stock, and there are lots of projects using them as well, so plenty of options. So I have a completely contrasting set of stencil here from the collection, and let me just grab a plate. We're going to be slightly naughty because why shouldn't we be naughty? So this is Loft Spackle. It is a modelling paste that when put on with a metal tool will take a greyish, more vintage undertone rather than staying completely white. The ordinary modelling paste from Pentart stays completely white, but this will take on a greyish undertone as ever. Let's just take more than I need. There we are. So this has a slightly grainy texture, and it's designed to go on walls, so it will give you a nicely permanent effect, and it is tintable with Pentart's pigment paste, but we're going to short circuit that because I want these tones to match with what I've got. So I'm actually just going to add some of my paints, and that way I know that this is going to be will work in with what I've got. So the turquoise blue, the mint, and the turquoise, if that makes sense. There we are. So you won't affect how this works, providing you are careful with the amounts that you mix in. There we are. So that gives us those. So let's just mix that in. So I'm going to get myself a coloured texture paste that will settle to a more grey vintaged tone, and I think you'll be able to see that colour then works quite well with those. Let me just mix that one, and it doesn't have to be mixed fully. That's fine. I'm quite happy to have grey shade because you're adding your paint to a white medium. It's always going to be paler, and that's why if you use the pigment paste instead of the paint, you can get a darker colour without adding as much volume of another wet product. If you're going to pop something through a stencil, you don't want to have a thin medium that's going to leach underneath. So it's important then that you stick to things that will give you a good colour. So we've tinted that. Let's just lift this back into place so that we can see, and we'll pop that there. I'll get rid of those because that's in the way. And now I have my paste, and I'm going to add these not all over, because adding it all over would be a bit daft really, wouldn't it? But I am deliberately going to take it onto some of my onto my rice paper. I could stick it down to give a more even feel, and that's just moved, which is my bad. So because I haven't stuck it down, but this will help to blur the edges, and I don't want it all to be the same, which is, and I can take these through. I do want to fill some of these cracks though. You don't want to do that, which is what I've just done. So let's see if we can needle that up a little bit. I'm not overly precious. And say if it's going to bother you having uneven edges, then please just anchor it down better, because it's your project, so you have to be happy with it. You see, that's moving all of the time because I haven't got it anchored, and that's it's not going to worry me too greatly. But if it will you, then there we are. So I'm going to have areas of crackle, areas of stenciling, mixture of colours. I'm just going to pop this now onto the floor to dry. Where did I put my loft spackle? Aha, that's the biggest pot, so that can sit onto there. And please, ladies, do clean off your stencil. There are lots of stencils in this range, but I just wanted a generic background stencil, so you can choose what you want. If I wasn't on a live, then you could push this, what's left onto here, onto a piece of paper or onto an art journal page as a base layer, rather than wasting the product by wiping it off like this. But lots of uses. And that's try not to buckle your stencils, because that does have a habit of cream crackering them, I'm afraid. Right, that can go down there in case I decide I need that again. I shouldn't do. Okay, so we have our pieces quietly here, and I don't want them to be clean. I know, shock horror, but I don't. So I have out here that antique paste in Umbra, and partly because it was the first, my first introduction to antiquing products, maybe because actually for me it gives a softer tone than any of the water-based products, but as I say, you do you. There are browns, umbras, dark browns, ochres in the Lasurs and also in the antiquing gels. But this just to me gives a softer finish. The colour is just what I prefer. So I've covered that and I'm just going to wipe it back. And you can take back as much as you want. It will take a while to dry, but now my word smile looks there, and it looks like I've got a well-chewed bone. Well, I hope it looks like I've got a well-chewed bone. So let's just do the same for our dogs. When you're doing this, it is sort of important that you do make sure you get your antiquing product into every nook and cranny, because if you don't, you really will see where you haven't done it. There we are. So that just allows me then to bring out a lot of that detail. And this is a wax-based product. So that means that from here on out, it's difficult. It will be difficult for me to add a water-based product over the top, because oil and water don't mix, obviously. And so if I want to add more details, I'm going to need to use a wax-based or oil-based product, rather than a water-based one. But there we are. So now I've got my things. So let's that's a useful tip, isn't it? If you're using an oil-based product, then it needs to be towards the end, and then you can think only about adding an oil-based product over the top, so a wax rather than dry brush. Dry brushing with acrylic paints, which are water-based, needs to be done first. There we are. And then you can take back as much or as little as you want, but the numbers on those moulds then become clear. It's a good way of finding out what's gone on. Waxes come in lots of different colours. I tend to stick to a few that I go to with gold, but there's silver, copper, bronze, brass. So lots of different options. Chameleon colours that look like one but are really pretty. Sparkling silver if you're doing a pretty project. Clearly this isn't a pretty, well, it is a pretty project, but it's not it's definitely more on the vintage aged feel to the whole piece. We are going to have to get that paint dry, or that stenciling dry in a minute, and then I've got a spray with water for that. I'll talk you through what I did for that, and if it's no longer sprayable, well, we'll splish it and move it with a big soft brush. So those are our embellishments, and let's just take a little bit of gold wax. Yeah, add a little bit of gold, but a little bit, she says, onto there, to the bones. There we are. So our collar has a little bit of a more metallic feel. There we are. You can take it round the sides as you wish. There we are. Right, let's clear that wax before I have a pickle. I might, on the project, finish to add some more, but on the other hand, I might not. We'll see how I feel. That's getting that. So let's just take this. So hopefully the edges will now be reasonably dry, and I can sand off that excess. Sorry about that noise. There's not much. You see, my bad, because I haven't got it stuck down. I knew there'll be a reason to having keeping out my stuff. I don't want the paint on there, but there we are. So that's going to need to dry before I can tackle that area, but that's okay. We can do that. You'll get the idea as to what we're doing. What have I done with that? Oh, that's what I've done with that. So let's just take off what we can here down to where it is reasonably dry. So push down at an angle. And if you take from the top down, you'll keep the bit that you want. You're less likely to damage the bit that you want on the piece. That needs to be properly dried before I go into there. So let me just turn this round. It's definitely an easier way of doing it than pre-cutting everything and then trying to line things up. So if you try to line a shaped piece up, you never ever, well, I can never ever get them lined exactly. There we are. Should be dry, so it's not quite dry. Needs must. Up and down. Try not to scrabble, because that really isn't good. I can tidy this up off the live, ladies. So I will not worry about it being entirely precise at this point in time. There we are. That bit's still wet. If I'm not careful, I will make a mess of that stenciling. There we are. And let's see where we go. Oh, sorry if that's just made you fall. So I will tidy up that corner when everything is properly dry, because if I try and do it now, then I will have undoubtedly a real mess. I just need to get some of this stenciling dry before I do the next bit. Will it matter entirely if I don't have it dry? Probably not. And you think, well, you did all of that work, you added all of that crackle, you're covering it all up. And the answer is yes, I am. But each layer has a purpose. Each layer will ultimately show through on the finished piece. And each layer adds to the whole effect overall. So that's why I have done that. So in this, in that bottle I haven't got. There we are. I think we're going to go with the rest. So in this spray bottle is water. I promise you, it's water. There we are. But I don't want water. I do want colour. Now I don't need all of that. So let's just shovel some of that into there. So you can take your wall decor lasers. This one is light rust. And add it into a squirty bottle with some water. It's a water-based product. So you can make your own sprays in any colour that you want. And you can make them in any intensity that you want. You just have to mix what you have put in. So let me just give this a mix. That's very pale, so I'm going to clearly want to add a bit more into there. And then just play to your heart's content. That's because it hasn't all gone down, but there you go. There we are. So mix the colour to suit yourself. Remember, it's easier to add than it is to try taking away. So if you add too much, then you're going to end up having to throw half your bottle away to add some more water to dilute it. Okay, but there's plenty in the pots. And I could be using umber, but I'm wanting to add in now some of these yellower tones that are in that paper. And that's why I've gone for this light rust colour over the, let's mix this in, over the others. That's better. There we are. Good. So we now have a problem with a leaky pot. Good. There we are. We've clog sorted. And by doing this, come on, behave. So I can mop up. There we are. It's just it's typical, isn't it? Typical. Why do spray bottles always do this? They do, don't they? So, There we are. It's because what this is going to do is fill in all of those cracks for me. There we are. Do I want it all covered all over? No. So I'm now just going to gently mop off the surface. Okay. Let's get rid of that. And I've deliberately taken that over onto my rice paper to cover that. There we are. This area is going to carry on and be changed. So, because that's where I'm going to start building my focal composition. So I'm happy now that I've got some areas that are blurred together. There we are. Let's just give that. And now you can see where all of that work for the crackle actually went in. Now I'm going to struggle to glue things down on this at the moment because it's sopping wet, because I've used a fair amount of water on that thing. So let me just give the central part a reasonable dry. Because if I add my paper elements that are not varnished onto here, where it's wet, they're just going to soak them all in, and I do want a difference. And I'm not going to distress my edges of these today. Well, I could do, if you know, that's an option, isn't it? It's always an option. But I've now created a background utilising all of those layers and the textures from that beautiful wall decor cracking plaster range. I've added more texture with my lost spackle, which I think, although I've coloured them with the greens and the turquoises and the blue greens and the mint, they are now getting a grey undertone, which fits better with the colour of the papers that I've chosen. Right, so let's just get some of this a bit more dry. So I have some elements that have come from the card pack that comes with the collection. Okay, I will dry these off the line. So this is all from the card pack. They're double-sided, so you can use whatever side you want. And I will ultimately glue that in place there. I've got a card. I've got 3 cards. I just have to remember what I did with these. There we are. That's more neutral. I'll pop that there. I'm not going to pop that there. I've taken another card and I've torn it. Onward. So this is one piece that I've divided into 3. Didn't like the words, but I did like the effect of the piece. Now it has to be a reason why I have that piece out. Can I remember what that reason is? So I can use either my heavy body gel, let me grab, because I have that out, heavy body gel mat to stick these down, or as these are paper, I can use my express glue. The choice is yours for doing that. So that I've now got an area that's going to define what I'm doing. So I want him there. No, I don't want him there. He's looking in. So I'm going to pop that there. And I'm going to pop him there. But I want to lift this up and give myself some extra depth. So I have, these are just canvas stretchers. Okay. I'll get this. Okay. So he can go there. I'm going to lift him up. We're going to tuck stuff under, in, under, over, and we're going to build our layers. So canvas stretcher onto there, bit more glue, and the joy of using the heavy body gel is it gives me wiggle room, which is always useful. Let's just stack these together. It's the reason why there are this many out, so I'm sure that there we are. Let's just stack those neatly into a pack. Use what you have. You could just as easily be using leftover bits of MDF, or even chunks of cardboard will work just as well if that's what you've got lying around. You always have spaces lying about. So from the card pack, I have I love you. Okay. But I didn't want the I love you. I wanted the day is yours. So that's okay. So I'm just going to tuck that bit onto there. And then I'm going to hide the edge, the bottom of that dog. Okay, so that can now move over just a little bit. Yep. So let's just pop that there, pop that there. He's going to go onto there. That's going to go there. Let's just pop this onto there while the going is good. And then obviously I will glue everything else down off the live, but that's okay. So we've got our dog, because they do make the days, don't they? And then that one here. Going to make my life difficult. So let's just pop that bit of glue underneath there. Pop a bit of glue underneath there. So that will help anchor that and that and that. Okay. And let's clean that mess. And by placing and then popping things on, I can move stuff about as I want. So he is going to sit. He's got one too many, I think. So let's just get rid of that. There we are. Right, you want that one that way, you want that straight, you want that straight, you want that straight, you want that straight. There we are. So my two dogs are now anchored in place. I'll straighten that. I've got lines here to make my life easy, haven't I? Well, you'd think to make my life easy. They won't be, but there we are. So let's just pop some of that under there. You can add as much or as little as you want. There we are. But the heavy body gel will work perfectly well as a paper piece. I have got an unstable surface because I've obviously got all of that texture underneath here. So there we are. Let's just pop that onto there. Let's straighten you. Let's straighten you. Let's tuck you. Add a little bit more glue onto there. So now we have the basis of our composition. Okay. So we've got our dogs. We've got sitting nicely. We've got a bone. And that bone is going to sit there. And although that means that dog isn't particularly well anchored, it's giving me the illusion that it will work for me. There we are. So smile then becomes the title of our piece. Yeah. Let's just move that because it's not straight. There we are. And I can add a bit more glue underneath there, pop that down. And now I have some extra pieces. So these are all from the die cut ephemera pad, from the chipboard pad pack that comes with the collection. So that might cause me just a little bit of heartache to build some of these up. So we're going to tuck some of these pieces up and under, and I've clearly got a big area there, and I don't want to use a stupid amount of my heavy body gel to lift these in place. So let me just bear with, let me find a decent pair of scissors that we're not going to cream cracker, and then we're going to start adding extra pieces. So I'm going to add, you just need to build up for stability, extra pieces. Now the ephemera is nice and thick and chunky, so that will work quite nicely. So I'm going to tuck in that floral element so that that doesn't quite look like it's all floating in thin air. And then we've got, what have we got? We've got another bone I'm going to pop into there, just bridging that piece across that. And that doesn't have to be particularly elevated, so that can sit there. As I say, these are elements from the die cut pad. We have the word joy. I could get out some brown ink and go around the edges, but I'm not going to. I'm going to pop joy there because our pets bring us joy, don't they? There we are. A little bird. Just because I rather liked him. Okay. So we have some numbers and we have our pieces. So there we are. Let's just start by popping some of these in place. So we're anchoring our pieces down. So remember that the ephemera, the die cuts are not self-adhesive. These are thick pieces. They're quite chunky. They're definitely not designed to, they won't warp, which is also quite good. So let's just pop that piece over there. Anchor that word in place. Got another flower here. I'm going to pop that over there. Slightly on a wonky angle, so I'm just going to give it a bit more because I'm deliberately wanting it at a wonky angle. And then I can tuck in some of these pieces. Pop the number 3 down there. I want to balance that number, so I'm going to anchor that over there. I want these in a set of, so that these are balanced. So we're going to pop a set of 3 of those just down there, just because we can. Okay. I don't want another number 3 there, but I don't want that one sitting in isolation. So I'm going to pop the number 2 up there. So I've got 3 and 2 there. And conveniently, I've got 3 and 2 there. And I'm going to pop that last piece of my resin down there. I've got some more numbers. So what I do, at this point, I may or may not add all of them. I want to cover that line because I don't like that line there. I'm going to pop it there. So that's a smaller bone. I'm going to tuck another floral under there, and I'm using my heavy body gel for the dimension by doing this. Okay, I can tuck that into there. Remember, your heavy body gel will dry opaque, so you don't necessarily want to have big blobs showing on the surface. Okay, so I'm going to tuck a little leaf into there. These are, as I say, all from the die cut pack, the chipboard pack. So I can pop these in. And I can tell my story. There we are. And I've got a tiny, tiny leaf there. I'm going to pop that onto there on the surface because I think that's going to... Do I need the extra numbers? Probably not. Okay. Let's just have a little trial and see what we like. Do I want a number down here? Do I want to... Or am I happy to leave them as they are? I actually do like that number up there. So let's just give that a little... Okay. At some point, all of the pieces here worked in my brain. Got another flower here. And I'm just going to pop that up onto there. So I'm going to give it a little bit of extra texture, a little bit of extra height. So my elements are all linked together. The day is yours. There we are. I'm going to leave the clock off because I don't think I want the clock now, having done that. And I'm going to leave those other numbers off. So, ladies, we have our girl's best friend. Obviously, number one. But with this collection, you could do something very, very similar, but with the cats that are in the mould. So if cats are your preferred animal, then choose away the cat. If the dogs are your best friend, then use the dogs. So I hope that that has been a useful live for you this evening. But thank you very much for watching. I wish you all a good week and hope to see you online on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube, showing what creations you have enjoyed making over the last week or so. So good night, ladies. Please take care of yourself, and I will see you soon.